Eve and Edie. This is a great... Oh, we mentioned... America.
Coming to America.
He's a very, very passionate man.
Generous, he helps everyone.
Driven, sometimes crazy, hot-headed.
Can't sit still, he can't really stop.
And he's very competitive.
Which, can always get you, business-wise, personal-wise, into some interesting situations.
Once he puts his mind to something, there's no stopping him.
George Turek is an amazing human being.
Again, you never know what you're going to encounter and what he's going to ask you to do.
A father figure to many people and savior to many others.
George Turek is very inspirational, motivational, and above all, never afraid to take chances.
And the most important thing that you need to know about George Charles Turek is that he can make a mean martini.
Boom, boom, boom.
George Turek was born in Detroit, Michigan on May 10, 1948. His parents were second-generation Hungarian Americans. George Sr. was a hard man, a tough-as-nails World War II vet, quick with the one-liners and quick with his fists. He worked, like his father before him, as a custodian in the public school system. George's mother, Mary, grew up in coal country, Pennsylvania. They met during the war, married, and settled in the town of Redford, just outside Detroit. George came along first, and then, 10 years later, his brother Howard joined the family. In the 1950s and 60s, Redford was a blue-collar Catholic town. And at that time, if you were a Catholic teen like George, you dreamed of going to Catholic Central, the best school in Detroit. But it was expensive and considered beyond the means of the Tureks. Nonetheless, George Sr. and Mary somehow saved up enough to pay for the first year's tuition. George was in. He was a Catholic Central shamrock at last.
I know that the school had a huge impact on him.
He was a very determined young man. He used to hitchhike to school, I think, almost every day.
He was expelled from Catholic Central, He's probably I think he's the first alumni to be awarded that was ever expelled from that school.
I'd have to look at the records to see, and I could do that, but George probably wouldn't want me to.
Really, every time he brings up that story of what happened and when he was expelled and his father, threw him up against the wall and said, you're on your own, you're out. We're leaving on vacation and you're not coming with us. That moment in time has defined who he is today.
George said he wanted to go to Catholic Central. His dad told him, well, if you do, you pay for it, you get there. And I think that was one of the wisest things that his dad did, because look at George as he developed his own initiative and determination from that. And he did. He worked for his tuition, which wasn't $12,000 a year at that time.
He's a very proud Catholic Central alum. He talks about it all the time. He still wears his Catholic Central sweatshirt.
We give CC a lot of credit. CC I know it gave me the discipline to work hard and get everything together, but I know it gave him. George is, he loves CC.
But what I remember about George was that he was not a flashy sort of person in school. I always remembered the real good and the real bad. And I would say George would be on the high end of the good.
The young man who had once flunked out his freshman year won a scholarship to Eastern Michigan University, where he earned his B.S. in industrial technology. Most of his friends were taking the traditional route: marriage, kids, 9-to-5 job. But George had another dream, one he rarely talked about. So while his classmates were walking across the stage in their caps and gowns, George Turek was on his way to Pensacola. As an A-4 combat pilot, George had lived his dream, but with Vietnam winding down, he was called back home. He spent the next year as a flight instructor, helping other young men like himself fulfill their dreams. George retired from the Navy and used his GI Bill to return to school. He graduated from Michigan with a master's in business and took a job with Ford Motor Company. Once again, the traditional route was not enough for George. So when George Turek hit the fork in the road, with the choice to go left or right, he bulldozed right up the middle and made his own path. In 1978, just shy of his 30th birthday, George sold his house and used the $5,000 profit to start Medical Evaluation Specialists. MES, as it became known, was based on a simple concept that George had considered while working at Ford. Yet nobody had standardized the process. Nobody provided a true and consistent source of arbitration. Then George came along and invented the multi-billion-dollar third-party independent medical examination industry with just himself, an assistant, and one doctor.
You know, I started with a ice cream custard stand, and from there built this company called MES that was really just an unbelievable company to work for and be a part of.
It started out in a Michigan office and spread throughout the United States.
So on my first day, I'm sitting in the office, a little nervous, trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And here this guy comes walking in. He's got his aviator coat on, got shorts, docksiders, and he looks at me and he goes, "Who are you and what the hell do you do?" And I said, I'm your new guy. I'm Joe. I'm going to California. And by the way, I live in Brightmoor and I went to CC. And he goes, "Oh, nice." So once I mentioned CC, shoot.
I was 2 weeks into the job of working for his company. It was mandatory that I come to a toga party and that George was going to be there, so I would have an opportunity to meet him. That night, drove over to the building where our offices were, and lo and behold, there was about 40 people there, maybe 50, dressed in togas, and we proceeded to tear down the building that George had bought adjacent to the building that we worked in.
And I think looking back, he started a business, but he really kind of started an industry.
33 years later, when George finally sold MES to a New York Stock Exchange company in 2011, MES had over 1,000 employees and 20,000 providers all over the world.
It was always first on his list to take care of his employees. He wanted to give back to those people who were loyal and worked hard.
It was a credit to him the way he treated his employees, not just with a generous salary, but just with compassion and kindness and thoughtfulness. And so I was very struck by that.
No matter how busy he's been, he's always found the time to do good for other people. And I can tell you that I've seen it firsthand. He has changed lives for hundreds and hundreds of employees.
Just in our company, the amount of good he's done for the people who are sick, financial, whatever. If someone has a problem, it becomes his problem. He wants to do good for people. It's just in his blood.
But George is always out, finding things like that and finding ways to help. And he's just the most generous, caring person that I've ever known.
George had planned to retire and spend his time between his homes in Key West, Florida, Big Fork, Montana, and Houston, Texas. But he had a problem. As a veteran, he couldn't stomach the idea of MES's Veterans Evaluation Services Division being compromised. The service was too important to veterans' lives. So against the advice of just about everyone, he decided to keep the division of less than 50 employees as a standalone company.
His passion in life is making sure that veterans who have put their life on the line for us, and some of them have lost limbs and are disabled severely from the wars, he wants to make sure that they get a fair evaluation and get through the system so that they get the benefits that they're entitled to.
George has found a way to combine his philanthropic interests or doing the right thing with making a living too.
It was amazing that when he moved from Warren, Michigan to Houston, Texas, most of his employees came with him. Oh, that's really unusual.
We travel to DC frequently to support and fight for veterans and active duty service members.
It's nice being a veteran-owned company, being veterans ourselves, to help service other veterans around the world.
It's fun working with George. I mean, it's fun. No 2 days are alike, no 2 hours are alike.
George is very generous with his time and efforts, and working with George is really fun and entertaining, and you never know what you're going to be encountering throughout your day.
And no matter how large we continue to grow, it still has that family feel.
6 years later, Veterans Evaluation Services is bigger than the parent company George sold. And the long-timers will say he's mellowed over the years, pointing to the fact that he has not only avoided killing millennials, he's actually hired them. The drive is still there. George leads as he has always led, from the front.
We really do respect what he does for the vets with the hero flights. He doesn't always want the spotlight from it. He likes to stay in the background, but he's very passionate about it, and we see that when we talk to him, and we feel it ourselves.
Having a plane, you know, that was something that he'd always dreamed of, and so he got it. And with him, the first thing that he thinks about with these things is, how can I do something for somebody else?
When George purchased his first airplane, his primary mission there was to be able to utilize it for hero flights. The type of plane we purchased was easily accessible to amputees.
Completely free. They just show up, get on it, and go.
We've taken wounded warriors all over the country. We've taken them for treatment. We've taken them to be parts of veterans parades and reunions.
Sometimes to meet their families, sometimes to go to additional medical treatment.
Yeah, that's not a cheap donation there, you know. That's, keeping the jet up in the air is pretty expensive.
To me, it's beyond a charity because it's a service.
My name's John Arroyo. I was shot at Fort Hood April 2nd, 2014.
We have an active shooter currently on Fort Hood. Just be advised, they're saying that the vehicle
I was actually shot in the throat with a .45 from 15 yards. I stumbled back to my car and I laid on the ground. As I laid on the ground, I started thinking about my wife, started thinking about, you know, my life started to flash before my eyes. The next thing I know, I literally heard the audible voice of God tell me to get up off the ground. So when I got up, I held onto my throat, I went looking for help. I see this individual walking towards me. I don't think nothing of it. I'm wondering why this guy's not helping me because I'm profusely bleeding. He gets within 10 feet, I realize I'm standing before the guy that just shot me again. He's frantic, he's looking around. He stops right in front of me. I can't believe this guy didn't shoot me again, but God blinded him. These medics come running out and they yell to me, "Hey soldier, are you okay?" I turn to them and yell, "No, I've been shot, there's a shooter." They get me into surgery, they do work all those miracles, and they say he's gonna be in a medical induced coma until Saturday. Right after they tell my wife that, my wife walks up to me, grabs my hand, and I wake up. It's just truly amazing what George is doing for us veterans, because having people on our side, see, America hasn't stopped fighting for us. You know, the military does so much in the government, but there's a point in time when they can only do so much, and that's when America steps in. That's when their sons and daughters, they walk up to us and they say, "We got your back." And today, George Turek and his family were those people that walked up to me and said, "Hey, look, we got your back. We're gonna get you to California, and we're gonna get you back home to Texas, and we're gonna do whatever it takes, because guess what? You haven't stopped fighting for us, so I won't stop fighting for you."
True to his nature, he took his love of flying and he made it work toward helping somebody else, whether they're human or furry.
He has 2 jets, one of which was supposed to be sold and ended up being recommissioned to be used to save the lives of dogs that are on death row.
Hank's Flights was created as a result of our desire to keep the memory of Hank alive, who was our beloved golden retriever.
As a nonprofit, we don't very often get calls from somebody that says they have a plane and they're willing to donate a flight. So it was a memorable conversation, and we've done a number of successful flights with Hank's Flights. It's a real honor to work with them.
Basically, the entire jet was stripped of all its seats and set up so we can stuff as many kennels as we can in there. It kind of looks like a clown car for puppies when it stops, and they just keep bringing all these dogs out of the plane.
So once a month now, we transport anywhere from 50 to 60 dogs out of Houston.
Transporting
animals out of Montgomery County over to Colorado, up to the Northeast.
We've flown over 1,000 dogs and cats.
They wanted to get involved in the community, and there's a huge need for the shelters and the rescues down here, and this was a way that we could get involved and help them.
It's just been an extremely rewarding experience for us, knowing that those animals are finding a forever home, and not only finding a forever home, but they're influencing and making people happy all over the country and probably all over the world.
He has so much on his plate every hour of every day. For him to devote any time whatsoever to a cause like that shows you where his heart is. He's always trying to help others, whether it's an animal, a person, an employee, somebody that he comes across day to day in his normal life. He's that kind of person. He wants to make a change for the better in somebody's life, and that's just one example of how he does it.
He likes to do the right thing. So when he hears about situations, sees opportunities for him to help, he'll start doing what he wants to do, whether it's discovering some guy and decided he was going to get this guy into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as well as getting his career going again. That's just sort of the other side of George.
The story of Johnny Johnson was he hired Chuck Berry for a New Year's gig. They started working together, and the rest is history. We all know who Chuck Berry is. However, nobody knew who Johnny was. Nobody knew that Johnny was Johnny in Johnny Be Good. That's where the name came from. Keith Richards went and found Johnny Johnson. He was driving an old folks home bus. That was his job, and he was still living in East St. Louis.
He lived in a really tough neighborhood. He had to take a gun with him to walk his dog.
Whereas Chuck, glory and fame and everything that he's got with him. Johnny wrote a lot of those early songs, and Chuck took all the credit for it.
Chuck would say something like, I got this part, and Johnny go, well, why don't we try this? And vice versa, that's songwriting. But in his mind, he's like, I'm just making up music. Chuck wrote the words, he wrote it, literally. It's like, I don't know how to write notes on a page. The only person that was writing anything was Chuck, because he would write the words. Johnny. And it all really comes down with him, not just the lyrics, but because that rhythm that he plays, which is junk, 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 which is based exactly on bum, 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 bum.
Chuck adapted it guitar. I know that too because of the key it's in. It's in piano, it's in Johnny's keys, it's in piano keys. Chuck adapted them to guitar and put those great lyrics behind them. But without somebody to give him them riffs, voila, no song.
When George married Linda, they ended up hiring Johnny Johnson and didn't know his background story, really. So they hired his band to play the wedding, and they had learned, you're the Johnny who worked with Chuck Berry and created rock and roll?
So then George is on board. Oh my God, Johnny's co-creator of rock and roll. We got to do something about this.
Johnny spent a lot of time at our home. We all just became a big family. He was like a grandfather figure to us, and we thoroughly enjoyed spending time with him.
Mom made him the West Virginia country biscuits, sausage, stuff that his wife Frances wouldn't let him eat at home. It just became a very special time in our lives.
Chuck Berry is the first musician that was ever inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
What did it open with? Chuck Berry. Johnny was sitting with us at our table at our house watching it live. It really affected George a lot.
He wanted to right or wrong.
And he said, I don't care what it takes. He deserves to be there. I'm going to make it happen.
George and Travis together were determined to change the course of rock and roll music history, and they did.
From that moment on, he says, I am going to get Johnny in that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
He just went kicking doors in, not knocking on them. He went kicking them in with people in the music industry.
So the first thing he thinks about is, what magazine or newspaper do they all read? Well, they all read Billboard. So he says, okay, I'm taking out a full-page ad at Billboard. We're going to write a letter to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that says Johnny should be in the Hall of Fame, and I'm going to get all these people to sign it.
The Rolling Stones, Bonnie Raitt, Little Richard.
Dick Clark, Rod Stewart, Keith Richards, Eric Clapton. I mean, you go through this list of rock and roll icons. Then he calls the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Well, we don't really have a category for Johnny. He was a sideman. So the pushing begins.
And Travis wrote the biography of Johnny. He took time off from college and wrote the biography.
Finally, they have a Johnny Johnson night at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. At that moment, we say, okay, now we're here. You know, we're here, they're listening, and so they say, we're gonna make a sideman category. Bingo. And then sure enough, the next year,
best musicians in the world, James Burton, Johnny Johnson.
It was one of the proudest moments I ever had of my husband and my son, and it could not have been better.
What made it extra special for us was the fact that it was for Johnny, who was the most humble, beautiful person. To give him that moment that he deserved and earned, George does this thing. I mean, we're talking years of commitment.
But because of people like Keith, Richard, and George Turek, and my beautiful wife, Frances, I'm standing here in front of you tonight. This is my proudest moment of my life. Thank you.
George Turek made his fortune and has spent his life giving back. But for all his adventures, there was one place that he could not forget. The place that defined him and set him on the path to success, Catholic Central.
One of the first things I learned about George was his complete devotion to his alma mater, Catholic Central.
In 1989, when Father Joe Moffat, the principal of Catholic Central, called me asking if I was willing to come back to Catholic Central as the Director of Advancement and including Alumni Relations. It turned out that he had called George, who was very successful in his business at the time, asking for a rather large donation. And George said, I'm giving Catholic Central nothing until you put somebody in the alumni office that I feel comfortable with.
Father Elmer and George never lost touch. Father Elmer was visiting us, and George says, well, you know, you're the perfect person who needs to get this thing going, and you really need to get back to Catholic Central so we can get this thing started.
George would be, without a doubt, the most influential person in bringing me back to Catholic Central. It didn't take me long to decide to come back to CC because that's where my roots were and my heart was as well. Then it was up to me to ask George for money. And my first request, he said, I'm not going to give you any money. I'm going to give you a means to make money.
And George was determined to make sure that they had what they need, so he had his IT department from our company go in and set them up. This was way back in the days before many people had computers even.
Then he said, I will give you money, but in my own time. When the time is right for me, you'll get it.
As we became more successful in the company, our successes were also shared with Catholic Central over the years.
He did come up with, of course, his huge contribution to our endowment fund of $1 million. And to that we are eternally grateful to George.
Congratulations to George for this great honor. I know that this means a lot to you. This has been a journey for you to support Catholic Central, and we are all very, very proud and happy for you.
So congratulations, George. We're all real proud of you.
Congratulations, George. You absolutely deserve it.
George, congrats on your award, and we hope that you enjoy this night in your honor. Cheers.
Congratulations, George, on your big Alumni Award. I'm with you. Love you.
You're the best, George, and I appreciate everything you've always done for us and for being with us.
Congrats, George. Couldn't be prouder.
George, congratulations, honey. Love you. 30 years, I hope we have 30 more.
I just want to say I love you, Uncle George. You're a driving force in my life. You're an inspiration to everyone.
Congratulations, George!
Congratulations, George, on getting this great award. You deserve it, and it couldn't go to anybody better and more well-deserving than you.
I'm going to speak slowly and in little words because I know you're a Navy guy and I don't want to confuse you, but from this Air Force guy to you, I want to congratulate you. It's well-deserved. You do amazing work, and a lot of times we don't tell you how much we appreciate you, but we do. Looking forward to another 20 years with you. Congratulations.
Congratulations on this amazing honor, George. You are truly deserving of it.
George, congratulations. We love you and we're so proud of you, and we thank you for all that you do for your family and for everybody around the world. Thank you so much and congratulations.
Congratulations, George. You're amazing. I adore you, but you knew that.
George, Dad, congratulations. And you're an inspiration, and I'm honored to call you Dad.
Just want to say congratulations. I don't say this enough, but you are a dad for me, and you've changed my life. Everything that I have is because of your love for me, and I just want to say that I love you. You're an amazing person, and congratulations.
To George, I thank him very much, so much, for his generosity to CC, his love of CC, and hopefully his continuing love of Mary Alma Mater, the high school from which he graduated. George, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hi, honey. I am so happy for you tonight and so proud to be your wife. I'm thrilled that Catholic Central is honoring you. You so deserve it. You've been such a wonderful inspiration and motivation to all of us over these years. And all I can say is I hope all of the rest of the dreams that you have in life continue to come true. I love you.
Congratulations!